Welcome to Iris After Hours.
Casual conversations with inspirational speakers off the clock. Hi, welcome back to Iris After Hours.
Now today, as you can see, we have a general of the faith here, none other than Randy Clark. Randy, thank you so much for coming in today. I mean, you've written over 40 books and you have paved the way for a modern healing generation to go after the supernatural, to go after God, to go after theology, to know the Bible and to know His Word and to actually do the works that Jesus did. So Randy, thank you so much for coming in.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here.
My privilege.
Nathan has mentioned healing. You're known for going after healing in a powerful way. I myself was incredibly impacted at, I think, 17. I went on a youth power invasion trip to Brazil. I think gave my first word of knowledge ever for healing on that trip.
Come on.
Started preaching, didn't even want to, but saw such an outpouring of healing there, and you see it everywhere you go. I wanted to take us back to where that started. You personally experienced healing in your own life from a car accident you were in at 18,
yes.
And that kind of started you on this journey. Can you tell us a bit about that? How that started you on this journey of pursuing?
Yeah, two things started me having an interest in healing. One was I was 5, and my grandmother, who was illiterate, had told me, right here is where I heard the audible voice of God. So my grandmother, other than your mom's, only probably the 2 people I ever met that hears the audible voice of God.
Wow.
And she said, and he told me that if I would walk into the other bedroom and pray, he'd heal me. And she had a big growth in her throat. So she took me by the hand. It was only this little bitty 2-room block house, 2-bedroom. And we walked about 4 steps and was in the other bedroom. Said, now right here is where Grandma went. And I was praying, and I felt like a hot hand went down my throat, and it disappeared like that. Wow. So that story caused me to become interested in healing. And as a little boy, I would sit on my great-grandmother's lap and watch Oral Roberts on the tent meetings as around 3-4 years old.
Wow.
I still remember that. And then at 18, I was almost killed in a car accident and had a lot of major injuries. Found out many years later almost every vertebra in my back was fractured.
Oh my
goodness. I had paralysis of the digestive system, and almost most of the bones in my face was fractured, and I was on 50 milligram of Demerol morphine derivative every 3 hours.
For how long?
I was supposed to be in a hospital 49 to 77 days, but I was healed on the 15th day, and they were waiting on a brace for me to give me, and I could have been released then, but it was on the 20th day I got to go home. They told me to go home and go to bed. And I said, no, I'm going to church. Tonight's church. And you didn't get me out of here. God did. And I'm going to go testify to what He's done. That was on a Wednesday night. And on the following Sunday night, a revival broke out in the middle of the Jesus movement in the little Baptist church I was in.
No. Whereabouts?
That was
Southern
the Jesus
Illinois.
movement.
Southern Illinois.
Yeah. And so 11 of us were called to preach in the next 6 weeks. 11 young guys from 16 years old to 23. I was the second one to announce their call to ministry of those 11 guys. But it was all really kind of connected to that car accident. My second best friend was killed in the accident. He sat right beside me. Last thing that I said, matter of fact, my cousin hated Christians, and he's mad at me because I'd just been rededicated 4 days before, and I had been working in the oil field, so I had a new car and I had money, and I was buying the drugs that we were doing until 4 days before when I got rededicated. And so I gave them up, and they were mad at me. And my cousin said, Clark, if we had a wreck right now, you'd die and go to hell. And my second best friend, who was Catholic, who had told me 2 days before, I respect what you've done. As a matter of fact, when I have some wild oats I want to sow right now. But when I get old, like 30, yeah, I'm going to do what you've done, and I'm going to become a good Catholic like you've become a good Baptist, and I'm going to quit. He was drunk. He was an alcoholic. I'm going to quit getting drunk every day and stoned every night.
Wow.
So my cousin says, we had a wreck, now you die and go to hell. And my second best friend sitting next to me in the bucket seat said, that's right, Clark, you would. And I looked at him and said, no, I wouldn't, Joe. But what about you? And that was the last thing I said to him. And within 5 minutes, we were in a car accident. A guy passed me, lost control of his car, hit my car, knocked me off the road, and went 100 feet, hit a concrete culvert, and he went through the windshield, and neck was broken. He was killed instantly. That's the last thing I said to him. So it was that healing.
How did you?
How did you experience that healing? What happened? Did you pray?
No.
Was it just sovereign?
No, well,
Mum was praying.
yeah. My youth group prayed for me. It came in 3 stages. The specialists, I had 3 specialists, one for my spine, one for my intestines, which was paralyzed, and I had a tube into my stomach and being fed intravenously because I had a broken jaw. It was supposed to be set, and all this was broke, and this was broken here, and this is all broken here, and so my specialist came in to set my jaw. And he said, "Put your teeth together. Do it again. Do it again." And he said, "I don't get it. I've got your X-ray up there. I came here to set your jaw. It's already set." And then I was, like I said, I was taking Demerol, heavy narcotic, by injections every 3 hours just to deal with the pain. It felt like I had a 3-inch bladed knife in my back, my spine. And they were going to send me to St. Louis, Missouri to see if they could get the paralysis of the digestive system to start working. And my church, the youth group, Baptist, that really didn't have a theology of healing at all or a practice. They met at midnight, a bunch of them, the youth did, and they prayed for me, and they felt like they got it. They felt like they had a sense I was going to be okay. And the next morning when they checked me, the paralysis was gone. And so they took the tube out, and I didn't have to be fed then intravenously. And
were they the guys that you just 4 days ago recommitted your life? Were they involved in that recommitment?
No. The one that was killed was Catholic. The other guy was my cousin, best friend. He did not like Christians at all. He would get saved in the revival, though, and be called to preach. And so then, after the paralysis, then I had this pain, really bad pain, and I woke up like the next day and no pain.
So it was really gradual. It was really happening in stages.
It was like once it started, like in 3 to 5 days, all of it happened. And so I'm laying in bed now. I had reflective glasses to read the New Testament because I couldn't even have a pillow. And they said, if you have to move, punch this button. 3 people will come in and we'll make sure you don't move your spine because your spine can swell after a major injury like I had, and then you can go paraplegic or quadriplegic.
Yeah,
it would mainly be paraplegic for me because most of my damage was at the thoracic area, compression of the vertebrae and disc, and so when that so I had read books like this. My arms would get tired holding it up because I didn't even have a pillow. Couldn't even have a pillow.
Wow. And
so I was reading reading the Bible like this, and then my arms got hurting so much. They gave me reflective glasses so I could lay like this and read the Bible like this with these mirrors in here. And
that's amazing. Great
but
idea.
The point was I wasn't supposed to move, and so that morning when the pain was gone, I have a very, very strong impression, and it's this: I've healed you. Get up and walk. Now my head's not been lifted off the bed for by that time about 15 days. So I didn't even know if you've been laying flat for days, if you get up you can get nauseous. I didn't even know that. I wouldn't know that for years. But I got up and I let the rail down. And I'm not supposed to, you could be paralyzed if you move even.
Goodness.
And I believed that was God so much I got out and walked.
You walked?
Yeah, I walked and I went out into the hall and the nurses went crazy and just this is terrible. You know, you're not even supposed to move. And so I quit taking the Demerol all at once. I wasn't weaned off of it. And so that night, I started the sweats and shakes and just anxiety attack. And
from quitting the drug.
Yeah. But I didn't know what it was. So at first, and I clicked for a nurse to come in, and she said, "What's going on?" Took my vitals and said my heartbeat was racing, and I was very anxious. And she said, "Do you want a shot?" And I said, "No, that's what's wrong with me. I'm having withdrawals."
Oh, you really? Yeah.
I realized instantly as soon as she said, "Do you want a shot?" I said, "That's what's wrong.
That's what's going on."
So as soon as she left, I prayed, "Lord, I ask you to come." And I just like to blanket of peace came on me instantly.
Oh, Jesus.
And withdrawal, every symptom withdrawal stopped instantly.
Wow.
And then I got out of the hospital.
In a moment.
Instead of 49 to 77 days, I was out on the 20th day. And could have been on the 15th if they would have let me, but they wouldn't let me. They was waiting for a brace to be made to give me.
So you had an undeniable experience. You were saying
Undeniable.
No one could tell you that wasn't true, that healing couldn't
Yeah,
happen. It had happened. It was
that healing that where I went to school, both college and seminary. It was a Baptist college and Baptist seminary, both of which were very liberal, and they didn't believe in the supernatural. They tried to explain away, naturalize all the miracles, and it was a quasi-cessationist. One side was cessation, the other side was just liberal. And what kept me from losing my faith in the middle of that was I knew that these healings had happened.
Had happened.
Yeah, I couldn't deny them. And it was the anchor that my faith was actually rooted in as far as the supernatural aspect of God.
Yeah, and that testimony, the undeniable testimony.
Yeah.
So God heals, Randy.
Yeah.
You experienced it.
Yeah.
Is there a formula? Have you ever witnessed a healing exactly how that happened to you in anyone else? That stages thing, or is there a formula to how God heals?
No, I don't think there's a formula. It's all relationship. It's hearing, and it's. I think there's an understanding, but understanding of something's different from a formula.
Yeah.
A formula is the same way, because there's no formula in the Scripture. And so many healings, so many different ways. Really, it's like Jesus really didn't. If there's anything you see, is he didn't have a formula.
Yes. So that's good to establish that there is no formula.
There is no formula. On the other hand, there are, I think, things that we can learn,
right,
that helps our faith. One of the books, which is none of the ones I have here with me, but I just completed about a year ago, was called Healing Breakthrough. In the first half of the book, I deal with practices and beliefs that actually hinder faith, that work against faith. And the second part of the book is what I've learned in 47 years of ministry.
47. Wow.
Yeah, I've been in ministry 47 years. What I've learned about faith and healing, and things, practices that you can utilize that helps create an atmosphere of faith, and understanding of teachings, and like understanding, for example, for me the most important thing is the relationship between revelatory gifts and the gift of faith, or the measure of faith, either one, and they're not the same, and then the gifts of healing,
which is different again.
Which is different again.
So there's three things you mentioned there, isn't it?
Yeah, and how they work together. And
so that's revelatory stuff, gift of faith, and gift of healing.
Yeah, and sometimes the revelatory gift is not so strong that it creates a gift of faith, but it creates a greater measure of faith.
Okay.
The gift of faith is whatever you really have a gift of faith, whatever you say, it happens. Wow. It doesn't matter if the person has any faith or not, because it's all on the person who has the gift of faith. So it's not like, well, if you'd had enough faith, you'd been healed. No, if you have the gift of faith, whatever you say happens. But then there's a measure of faith, which can be various levels. Sometimes it's not as strong as other times. But it's understanding, 1 John 5:14 says, if we ask anything according to his will, that's just key. We know that he's heard us, and we know that he's heard us, we see that which we ask. As a paraphrase. Well, the key there is knowing the will in a moment. Not the general will, like it's God's will to heal, but when. They say it's God's will to heal you, but when will that healing manifest? And revelatory gifts can let you know that this is the night that I'm to be healed.
Oh, yes.
Or this is the night that person's to be healed.
Yes.
And when you know that, then you know that you're praying according to the will of God for that very moment, and it will be answered. Wow. So it takes you into faith. So faith for me is not so much an emotion as it is an understanding, or it's based on understanding. So there's if I may say it, there's a rational component of faith.
Yes.
And at the same time, faith and reason often, reason would say that's impossible. But there's another side where reason and understand the ways of God that Moses said in Exodus 33, if I find faith with you, teach me or show me your ways that I may know you. You know. So understanding the ways can create faith.
Yes.
So,
gosh, they're so interlinked, aren't they?
They are. They're so interlinked. So
much
when you, as a minister,
connection.
if you begin to teach the people, so sometimes if it's driven on emotion alone, you can get a high emotion, but not necessarily faith. And we're not healed by emotion; we're healed by faith.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not against emotion. But I think instead of trying, like in Brazil particularly, a lot of times people try to work up their emotions.
Yep.
And sometimes I think their emotions actually get us in the way of the healing. And sometimes I have to say, I need you to dial down.
It's a passionate,
it's
a passionate group.
Very hot culture, that one.
I'm for the passion and everything, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's not passion. It just, sometimes it's a religious spirit
Yeah.
Yeah.
that
Trying to work
manifests
up.
and a working up. If I can only become emotional enough,
And sometimes it's fear too.
intense enough, and I think that actually hinders. So what for me is faith is more rest than striving. So I see it as so it's not
a good word,
striving,
Randy.
it's a rest.
Wow.
But God is the one who creates this kind of faith. So two emphases in the healing movements. I have another book written on the 5 different streams of healing that makes up the healing river. You know, the different streams, different movements. The apostolic New Testament stream, like an evangelical stream, a Pentecostal stream, a Word of Faith stream, and sacramental Catholic stream. And how what we believe about healing will affect the way we preach and the way we approach discipleship. And
Yes.
but
What's that book called?
I think it's called The Streams of Healing. The Healing River.
The Healing River.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about the streams that makes up the healing. Well, most of us think our stream is the river.
Yes.
And a lot of times, we're honest, we think all the
We
other
are the
streams
river.
we think all the other streams are foul-smelling tributaries. And if you get in one of those, you know, you could be up a
funny.
foul-smelling tributary without any visible means of propulsion. You know? So, but I realize
But it's
that
together
my
that
stream
makes the river.
is not the river. It's only a stream. Wow. And there's certain truths in each of those streams that we may need at a certain time. And it may not be the main truth of your own stream. So healing is a huge thing. I want to see a breakthrough because I didn't see any. I only saw 5 healings the first 14 years of ministry.
I was going to ask you about that. You kind of went
I
on this
prayed, but I didn't
journey
see
of
it.
pursuing it a
Yeah.
lot and not seeing
Yeah,
that.
because I didn't understand the ways.
See, this is common. Heidi's journey is the same. Wesley Campbell was the same. He was just talking here the other day, and so this is part of God's ways, taking us into faith to pursue it until it comes.
When I had a conference, and when I saw, I had an experience where God told me, I want you to teach on faith. I want you to teach on healing. I still heal today. This is all by strong impression. I want you to do a conference on healing, and I want you to preach differently. And
And are you thinking, I've only seen a few people healed in my life, and I'm doing
Right.
a conference on healing?
Well, I was to host a conference. I wasn't
Okay,
gonna do it.
okay.
I got to have a conference on in my church, and that's when God worked it out, divine appointments and stuff. That the team for the Vineyard came, and I saw more healings in 3 days than I'd seen in my whole life.
Wow.
And my church and I, many of us, were launched into getting words of knowledge and getting, different ways of getting words of knowledge and seeing healings on a monthly basis that we used to see in a lifetime. Now we saw on a monthly basis, and then it switched to weekly basis. And
I'm sorry to interrupt, Randy. Bill Johnson says the same thing about when you laid hands on him. He'd seen, if you count the miracles on one hand, they'd seen in years. You lay hands on Bill Johnson, and all of a sudden, in Weaverville, I think, the miracles are breaking out and they're seeing all this. So it's just so funny for me to hear you say that you had, and you passed. This is Bill, same story.
I think There's more. It was at Reading. He wasn't. He was already out of Weaverville.
Oh, he's already out of
Just got
Weaverville.
to Reading. Hadn't been there very long. And I went and did a healing seminar or conference or school or something for just a few days, 8 days, and we had hundreds of people get healed. And I had a breakthrough there, and his church saw more than it ever had. They began to see on a weekly basis what they used to see like on a monthly basis.
Yes.
It happened. It never went back down. And that's where I got a breakthrough because I was seeing about 30 healings. There's about 1,000 people there. And for a couple of years or several years, I would see 30 healings if there's 1,000 people a night.
Wow.
3%. So there it went. So I had 25 healings that I'd seen, and this is usually 30 a night. Well, half would be, 15 would be before, from the platform, and 15 with the laying on of hands by a team afterwards.
Yep.
So we haven't even got to the laying on of hands. This is just from the platform. We have 25, which is more than normal. And then I had this impression, very strong. I want you to pray like Abraham did for Sodom and Gomorrah, except instead of going down, go up. Ask me for more according to your measure of faith. It was just strange. So I told the people, I process out loud. Bill says, I like that about you because you really help us understand because we see how you process because you process out loud in front of everybody.
We can track with you, yeah.
Yeah. So I told them just what I thought God had said, and so we asked for 50. And I prayed, had some more words of knowledge and prayed, and had 57. And this is, again, before the prayer at the end. So this is more, almost double. Then we asked for 75. We prayed, and I had 75.
Gosh.
Then we asked for 100, and we prayed, and we had 137. So instead of 30, we have 137 gets healed that night. And we haven't even laid hands on people yet for praying. And all of a sudden, I understood that what I had thought was the sovereignty of God was not the sovereignty of God. He wanted to do much more than what we were seeing. It was much more on our part. Now, I do think there's sovereignty of God in things.
Yep.
And I think in some healings, that's a part of the answer. But we make it the main answer. And I think that when we make sovereignty, say whatever we're seeing, that is what God sovereignly willed, then it's almost like
Takes
then
away
God,
from the partnership.
it takes
of
away from the
it.
partnership, and it also makes God look like real stingy.
It's true. Yeah.
He doesn't really want to do much. If
He
this
just
is all
wants to heal a couple
if he
people
only wants
here
to
and
heal
there.
a few people here and there, that is, a guy
that's
here in Southern California on radio, I heard him say once, I believe in healing, but healing is not to be normative.
Not to be normative.
Not to be normative.
Like to become normal.
Right, not to be normative, not to be normal, not to be expected. And so the reason he said is this woman called in and asked him to
Interesting.
pray for her. And he didn't pray for her. He just explained why healing is not to be normal. He didn't even pray for her. It was a critic of mine on the radio. And
Sounds yeah.
so I really realized, man, if that's your theology, it's self-fulfilling. If your theology is healing is not
It's
to be
faith.
normative, you
It's
have
great
no
faith.
faith. You have very little faith because
by
it's
definition.
by definition because you're shocked if it happens. And I went through from 18, I was 32 when I had this experience in my Baptist church when the Vineyard guys came in, Blaine and others. So
So
that's
you were
when
32
healing-
when that happened?
That was 32 when that happened. And that's when healing started. At 42, 1 month away from being 43 though, I had another breakthrough, another meeting we did like Toronto. It went 8 months, 6 nights a week. And in 2 weeks, I saw more healings than I'd seen the first 25 years of ministry in 2 weeks.
What was that breakthrough?
That was, and there was no hands laid on me. There's no revelation. I think it was just like I was patiently kept knocking at the door for healing for 25 years of ministry, and it finally opened. And not that it finally opened, period, because had been for 11 years seeing people get healed, a lot more than we used to where it was, at least monthly. But after this, I went from, first of all, I'd be shocked if anybody got healed until 1984. And then healing was a lot more. And in 95, it was a whole lot more than we'd ever seen before.
And that was through Toronto? No.
It was a year after Toronto.
Year after
It was
Toronto.
a year after Toronto. And there was more healing after Toronto the first year. But it like 95 was like, I don't know, it was like all of a sudden heaven opened up and we began to see so many more healings. So after 95, it became, I was shocked if somebody didn't get healed every time I prayed for healing.
Wow.
In a meeting. If when we go for healing, and when I went for healing almost every meeting, I would be shocked if somebody didn't get healed. And before I was shocked if somebody did get healed. It was just the opposite. So where's sovereignty of God in that?
Yes.
Was it all of a
What a
sudden
great question.
God changed his mind, or was it something in me that changed? Then I went to Argentina and worked with Omar Cabrera, who's a famous healing evangelist, and I learned a lot from him that I talk about in the book Healing Breakthrough. And a lot of the stuff I learned either from Wimber or Cabrera, a whole lot from Cabrera, Omar Cabrera. And that was a turning point. And I remember I talked to his son. I said, because we were seeing so many healings, and I said, it must be being here in Argentina, this nation's in revival, that I'm seeing this. And he said, no, Randy, except for my dad and Carlos Anacondia, I've seen more healings. This was like 95, when you've been ministering, than anyone else. It's not you're here, there's something on you, which really encouraged my faith then.
Oh my goodness. And he saw that.
Yeah. Omar Jr. But I still didn't really understand. I gained a gradual, better understanding of healing in the ways. And I try to explain that all in the Healing Breakthrough book.
Yes.
Have you noticed a difference in ministry because you travel all around the world? Do you notice a difference when you're in your hometown or even in the U.S. versus when you're traveling internationally? Does it feel different? Does it?
Sometimes. But I went to a large vineyard, a couple thousand member vineyard in Dayton, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And when I got there, it felt like I was in Brazil.
Really?
We had so many healings.
Yeah.
That I remember that first night, a woman was healed of MS and walked out of her wheelchair. Another guy who could barely walk was running up and downstairs and running around the place. A woman who stuttered so bad that when she did an interview all of her life, that took a 15-minute interview took 45 minutes. They told me that she was such a bad stutterer, and she was talking without stuttering. And the next day got up and just articulately just gave this long testimony of, and only a lot of healing. So I asked the pastor, Doug Rowe, what did you do before I got here? Because this does not feel like the United States. This felt like Brazil. What have you done? Because this was just so, I stepped into it. Like,
Yeah.
Wow.
it was there. Faith was already there.
Yeah.
And he said, I went online and off of the internet, I took, for 8 weeks before you got here, I took about 2 minutes of videos of your meetings where you had people get healed.
Yeah.
And I showed them to my church every Sunday morning for 8 weeks before you got here.
Whoa.
And when I
so
stepped
they were
in,
expectant.
They were that, and now I do that on purpose, because once he told me,
Yeah.
I'm going,
Great
okay,
idea.
everywhere we're going to go, if I come, you've got to do this for 8 weeks before I get there. And it does make a huge
Yeah.
difference.
They were ready.
And we are seeing more in Europe right now than I've ever seen before. Some places can be harder.
Yeah.
I was just in a place in Europe that was quite hard. But right before I was there, I was in another country in Europe, and man, it was easy. And it depends on the church. It depends on the teaching. It depends on a lot of things.
Wow. Randy, you are a learner. Like, you have learnt healing in these 47 years. I can just see it now. Your humility is really obvious. Like, you see things happen and you incorporate it, just like the 2-minute videos, and Yeah, your humility is astounding in this. Has that been an important part of your journey, just to be before the feet of Jesus and to work out the ways of God and how healing works?
Oh, I've always wanted to learn. I'm still a learner. I have other people I've prayed for that see so much more than me. I mean, they see so many miracles. Just a few people that I've prayed for just see so many more miracles than I see.
So people you released.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, God released them. I got to be the donkey.
Yes, but
Jesus rode in on. It really is.
But like sons and daughters, almost like that.
Yeah.
You've helped to raise up in healing. Yeah.
Activation for you has been a huge part of your ministry.
That's the main call of my life.
Is that different to impartation? Activation, impartation,
No.
Same thing.
Well, there is a difference. Impartation is when it's given. That's not been there. Activation can be a bringing, calling forth, a release of
what's already there.
That can be there. And a lot of times, activation is nothing more than teaching. I really like teaching and coming at things with common sense and helping them to know, how do you get a word of knowledge? You're probably already getting, well, here's the way. Here's the way you can recognize. And we're going to pray for that to be activated. And then I'll wait 2 minutes, and people will, since '84. They'll start getting those words of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And at least 10% of the crowd on that first night. I remember I was in Brazil recently, and I said, I want 20 people to come up. There's about 3,000 people in the meeting. I said, I want 20 of you. It's a big church, Presbyterian church. And I said, I want 20 of you to come up and give. You've never given a word of knowledge before in your life. That's the first. If you've given one for
you can't. You can't come up.
You can later, but not now. This is activation. And so I was shocked because not 20, 200 people came up. And I'm thinking, well, that's it. I'm not going to get to preach tonight because it's going to take all the rest of the night to do this.
Yeah.
And that did. But anyway, we're starting down. Out of 200 people, 199 were accurate the first time they ever gave a word of knowledge. And I have 7 different ways I've discovered you can
One person was it?
One person
that
was
poor
it that we're aware of.
person.
And that person probably, the person just was too embarrassed to stand up and acknowledge it.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway,
I'm just thinking about that one person being
what would happen was what would happen is they would give a word, and for some of the people the word was so accurate, like the person's name, and it's like crazy accuracy for their very first time. And all 7 ways you can get a word of knowledge, almost all of them were represented.
Do you have a book on this?
Mm-hmm.
Which book's this one?
Well, I have a book called Word of Knowledge, but I also have let's see. No, not here. Essential Guide to Healing. I talk about it. I have a training manual that's in 17 languages. It's in it as well. I think the one on it is in this one, Power to Heal. I think I have a chapter in this one. It's all about different ways you can get words of knowledge. A lot of the stuff we've been talking about is in this one as well. Mm-hmm. But what was so amazing to me was sometimes these people would give a word of knowledge. Mm-hmm. It was so accurate that it caused the gift of faith in the person who had the condition, and they were instantly healed and stood up instantly like this, sign,
wow.
I was healed, at least 80% better already, just instantly. And when they would see that, the person who gave the word would often start weeping. So touched of God that God, if they'd never been used of God like that, they have a word so accurate, the person instantly gets healed, and an effect on the person who gave it was they start weeping.
Wow.
It makes, God be so real.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
He's
That's like
instantly in the
ministry
room.
breakthrough right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
On both
Have there
people.
been, what are some of the most difficult things that you've encountered in terms of having a mandate like this? I feel like it opens you up to criticism more than some things. Like, if you're a missionary and you're taking in kids, people are like, yes. But if you're going after healing, that can be quite controversial. Mm-hmm. Or people don't get healed. Like, what are some of the challenges that you've dealt with on this journey?
On a critical side, people, particularly from Southern California, have attacked me and the whole thing in books and stuff, and on TV and on radio mainly. But that doesn't bother me because I just know that it's what I call the Beelzebub effect. There's a book called 2,000 Years of Charismatic Christianity by Eddie Hyde, I think it. And if you read the book all at once, you just see that the devil has one major tactic to fight the spirit, to call the things of the spirit to say it's of the devil.
Yes.
Beelzebub.
Is that blasphemy of the Holy Spirit?
Well, that's where he talks about blaspheming the Holy Spirit. And so that's the theological side of it. And I don't that doesn't bother me too much. Then I have in one of the books I wrote about, actually a couple of books, a whole chapter on what happens when people don't get healed. And I think I have another sermon called, 2 sermons in a row. One's called Thrill of Victory, and one's the Agony of Defeat. The sermon on the Agony of Defeat is just a whole sermon of all these people, who mainly kids and teenagers, who didn't get healed, that need created miracles, and how it's so emotional. And so I talk about the cross. People argue whether the cross is in Isaiah 53 is in the sense of is healing in the atonement of Isaiah 53. That's the theological argument.
Yeah, like Sozo saved.
Yeah, I believe it is, but others don't. And
okay.
So the problem, I say, regardless of what you believe about that, healing is in the cross of Luke 9:23.
Come on.
If anyone would be my disciple, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. And I say, for those of us in the West, we don't have any persecution for anything, really. We're not going to be killed. We're not going to be shot. We're not going to be bombed. We're not going to be denied jobs because we're Christians.
Yeah.
So and in the context, one of the principles interpreting Scripture is how would the first audience have heard it and understood it?
Yep.
Well, when Jesus said that, there's no resurrection yet. There's been no crucifixion, no resurrection. So the cross doesn't have the same meaning that it would after the crucifixion and resurrection.
True.
It's not going to be seen as a symbol of victory. It's going to be understood. Its first audience is only going to understand that one way. That's a place of suffering. So people sometimes say that we charismatics don't have a theology of suffering and stuff like that. But we actually do. And it's tied in with the ministry of healing. The ministry of healing is the one place where most people who don't pray for the healing or did pray for healing and quit, it's not because their theology changes. It's because the emotional price tag with this ministry hurts so much that you quit.
Oh, can you say that again, Randy?
It's the emotion. So those of us who believe in healing are not the nuts and flakes, the shallow, because we have heard, pick up this cross, which is his ministry, other than the redemptive side of it, for salvation. But the whatsoever things, he'd been sent with the Father to do. Now he's believed on that you'd go and do likewise, and make disciples of all nations, baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and then teach them to do all things whatsoever I've commanded you. So this following in what we're supposed to do, healing is one of those things.
Yep.
Healing, deliverance, it's at the top of the list. But it's there's a price tag. I was preaching on this,
And it's an emotional. You said something about the emotional.
the emotional price tag.
Yes.
Of when people aren't healed. How do you handle that? So I'm
So
preaching.
people say, because you're called to healing, you've got to bear the suffering.
That's right.
Of,
and you enter
of the-
in to the
of not seeing it all the time and pushing through. So it's the people that
and the disappointment.
they get, there's too much, they're overwhelmed, they give
Yeah,
up.
it's easier
Right.
just not to do it.
And to give up. It's
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. So I'm teaching a whole denomination in Netherlands, which I'm going back soon. And it was a historic cessationist, which means cease, from the word cease. The gifts have ceased. Healing has ceased. There are no gifts of healing. They have ceased. Tongues have ceased. Prophecy ceased. Healing ceased. Miracles have ceased. This is what we call cessationism. It goes back to the Protestant Reformation. Calvin and Luther both, especially Calvin, though Luther prayed for 2 of his friends that got healed. But anyway, so this denomination has been Calvinist. They don't believe that healing's for today for 500 years. And they asked me a year ago, come and teach, because they wanted to switch the whole denomination from that to believing healing's for today. That was my task. And they said, we trust you, you know, that you understand us well enough that we feel like you're the one that's supposed to do it. So I came and went. There's this one guy, he got the second largest church in the denomination. He didn't like what I was saying. He didn't really agree with it. And was skeptical until I preached the sermon. Not the thrill of victory, all these people that got healed, but the following one, the agony of defeat. And he said the Spirit of God came on him as I was sharing about this, the ones who did not get healed and the price tag. And he's weeping. God's all over him. So that Sunday, the following day, Sunday morning, I'm preaching the largest church in that denomination. He has the second largest. And he called the pastor and told him, tell Randy, for the first time in the history of this church, a sermon was preached on healing, which he had delivered himself. And he'd been against it the day before. And I had people get healed. I said, tell Randy.
Wow.
I preached on him. And tell him the turning point was for me was when you were so honest and talked about the agony of defeat and the challenge to pick up this cross of Luke 9:23, which includes the ministry of healing.
Yes. Wow, that's so encouraging. Because this is what people shy away from, I think, with healing, is that there is the agony of defeat.
Yeah.
That they don't want to even pick up the other side. And this is so vital.
Yeah, I used to think it was intellectual pride that people didn't want to be involved in healing ministry because they didn't want to do anything that they weren't good at. And
Yeah.
Right.
you're not good. Nobody's good
Right.
at healing. You know, even the greatest ones I know do not. They still see a lot of people not get healed.
Yeah.
Out of everybody they pray for.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, I'm thinking, well, it's really a pride issue. You don't want to do something you don't feel good at. Then I thought, intellectual pride. I don't want to get involved in something I don't have answers for. And when I have the answers, then I'll enter this minute. Once I can answer these hard questions, well, you're not going to answer the hard questions.
It's
other
hard
than say,
just to not know.
I don't know. That's the answer. I don't know. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Isn't
But
it
I'm going
wonderful?
after it anyway.
Isn't it wonderful that Jesus didn't say, "When you understand it, I want you to follow me."
Yes.
When
When you
you
know it
He
all.
just says, "Come follow me." You know, like Abraham, not even knowing where he's going.
Yeah.
He just starts on the journey, not even knowing where it's going to be.
Wow.
Gosh.
I think we're almost out of time.
We've got 5 minutes.
But there's one story. Yeah, hopefully. I don't know if we can do this in time. But I just wanted you to touch on that moment. I've heard we're at Revival Alliance, the conference that's happening right now. And the story of you giving a word to my mom, and that being a catalytic moment for her, launching my parents into essentially what their ministry is today.
Yeah.
I just was wondering, what was that experience like for you? Do you remember that
Oh, yeah.
moment? Did it feel
I still
significant?
see it in my mind.
Yeah?
It's so clear. I'll never forget it till the day I die. It's just there.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that just from your perspective, because it's come up this weekend, and it's been, we've all been celebrating the history kind of this movement.
I preached on impartation that day. And your mom comes up. I wasn't even done. And she said is she doesn't do that, rare for her, but she came up, and she is on her knees and she's crying. Just Spirit of God's all over her. And I know your mom.
You did know her?
No,
Oh,
I
you
knew
did?
her name.
Oh, okay.
So I knew her name was Heidi, and I knew she was a missionary. I knew she had one church in Mozambique with about 300 people, and 200 of them were orphans or more. And that she was burned out and was wanting God to touch her, and if he didn't touch her, didn't know how she could go on, because John Arndt had told me all of that.
Okay.
Because he had pointed her out to me before the service started and said, that's Heidi. She came up here last month. She got healed physically. Now she needs this emotional, spiritual renewal. So I knew that about her. And when I saw her crying, coming up, it just stopped the sermon because everybody else starts coming up then. And I looked at her, and I heard myself say, and I knew it was prophecy.
Wow, when you hear yourself say it.
Because it's not something you would, you don't say what I said to someone you know is burned out.
Yeah.
I said, Heidi, God wants to know, do you want the nation of Mozambique?
Oh.
And she looks up, she's crying, and she lifts her hand and said, yes! And I heard myself say, God is going to give you the nation of Mozambique. And you will see the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk. And I think I said, and the dead to be raised. And the power of God hit her instantly. And it's just tremendous electricity and heat, and she hears the audible voice of God, and all the rest of it happened after that. So one time, the first time I actually got to talk to your mom very much, when I didn't really know what had happened till just before this, she and I were scheduled to preach at Bill's church at the same time in Reading, and she told me some of the stuff that was happening, and I didn't know that had been going on. And I asked her, because all the stuff that happened in the next 18 months was terrible. And I mean, it's actually the opposite of what I said. You know, you get malaria.
Is that part of the suffering?
3
Taking up the cross?
times. Your dad gets malaria, cerebral malaria. They confiscate the buildings. They lose $1 million of pledged money to them. If they wouldn't back away from Toronto, they lose the $1 million.
Yeah.
Your mom is, they think she has MS, and the doctors say she'll die if she goes back. And she says to the doctor, I will not die. I have a word. God's going to give me the nation of Mozambique. And if I have to preach from a wheelchair until God raises me up, I will. So I asked Heidi at that meeting, I said, Heidi, and I cried. I went through a box of Kleenex myself. That meeting with Bill when your mom was sharing, because I knew that you only had 200 churches in. Now it's like over 10,000. But anyway, I said, I had one question. I said, Heidi, I have a question for you. Could you have believed that the word I gave you was really from God in light of everything that went wrong for 18 months? No blind saw, no deaf heard, none of that stuff was happening. Could you have believed it was really from God if God hadn't have backed it up by his power instantly when I said it? And she said, if it hadn't have been for that power,
The manifest
power that hit her,
power, yeah.
I could not have sustained my faith that what you said was really God.
Yeah.
But because God backed it up,
Yeah.
I couldn't doubt it no matter what. It was actually the opposite was happening.
But it was an
And then it turned
undeniable
suddenly.
experience for
It was
her. It wasn't
undeniable.
just something she heard. It was an
right.
experience.
It just wasn't words that I spoke.
Yeah.
It was God instantly backed up those words with his power and his voice that she heard audibly, and took her into a vision. All the other stuff. The experience followed the prophetic word I gave her instantly. You know. So that was what gave her such a great gift of faith.
God
That
loves a good story.
It sustained her through everything until there was the suddenly, because she corrected me. I said, and then suddenly after about 18 months, 3 people, women, were healed in 3 months, and they all had her name.
Yeah, Heidi. Yeah, the Heidi story.
And then she said, wait, Randy, she heard him. That's wrong. It wasn't 3 months, it's 3 days. In 3 different provinces, in 3 days, 3 women, all blind, got
All
their
called
sight.
Heidi.
And they're all called,
Oh my God.
yeah, in Portuguese.
Wow. And you've gotten to go to Mozambique multiple times and experience all of that happening. It's such an amazing journey. There's so
Great
much.
people movement.
Yes, Randy,
much
would you
to
come back
get
another
to.
time when you have some availability? We'd love to do a second podcast with you another time, because
Yeah.
obviously there's
There's
so many
much.
more.
It's so inspiring to hear the journey, though.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your most recent book?
This is my most recent book.
Yes.
Baptized in the Spirit, God's presence resting upon you with power. It deals with baptism in the Spirit. It's not a traditional Pentecostal view, but neither is it traditional evangelical view. And I draw upon church history. I quote modern day, very younger, like 30s and 40-year-old Pentecostal theologians, how they're evolving and some of the things they're saying.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be, instead of walls built, bridges built, to where people can have validity in their experience, so their experience may be different from somebody else. And it's, I think it will bring a lot of healing and cause a lot of people to say, I now want that.
Yeah.
Because I think it'll take some of the walls away.
That is awesome.
And this is the one I wrote to refute the book Strange Fire. It's the same table of contents,
Awesome.
but it's the other side. It's exactly the same table of contents that Strange Fire has in it.
Wow.
And so if you're evangelical and you've got questions about, well, what about these things you've heard, I answer them theologically and biblically.
This
speaking.
one's the Essential Guide to the Power of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
This
essential
one.
guide. The gifts are still for today is basically what.
Yeah.
And this is one of the most practical I have on power to heal. It doesn't go into some of the theological issues as much as the book Authority to Heal does, but it's very, very helpful. But the one I didn't bring, which I think is the most practical as far as if you're a pastor or an evangelist and you want to, or just a person wants to see more healing and have more faith for healing, and how to create it by cooperating with God. See, I don't think that we can create it, but we can create an atmosphere
Yeah.
that then causes people to enter into more
Yeah.
by truth.
Yeah.
It's by teaching.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
I mean,
good.
one of the big things I'm taking away from this right now, Randy, is that it's not simple. The whole thing, God bringing us into healing, you can't just make up an opinion very quickly about it, because there's so much involvement. God's partnering with us, wanting us to step forth in faith. So there's a lot. And you've dedicated your life to learning this. So it's so great to learn from you and to have the books to learn from and your manuals. Is there a book about the agony of defeat?
Thrill of victory, agony, defeat. Yeah,
What's that one called?
thrill of victory, agony, defeat.
That is a good title for that book.
Yeah,
Perfect.
So that's
it's both teachings.
in the one little.
Yeah,
Come on, I'm getting that one.
I feel like we should power through the last questions just because I think we should.
Okay,
There's
Chrissy.
a few very profound
Chrissy,
questions
you've got
we have
faith.
for you.
You've got faith for this.
I do, yeah.
Okay, come on. Okay, we're
So
gonna
you
go
want
quick.
short answers.
Yes, very short.
Okay.
These are short. Favorite movie?
What?
Favorite movie?
Yeah. What is your favorite?
I don't know what my favorite movie
Oh,
is.
you avoided this on the
I
panel,
did.
didn't you?
Yeah, favorite movie, because I don't really.
That's funny.
I think I said the Bourne series.
Oh yeah, you like the Bourne series.
yeah.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
solid action.
Come on.
Yeah, I like it when it's good, the bad, the good guys win, the bad guys lose.
Yes.
You know.
Simple.
Yeah.
That's great.
Dramatic story.
Real guy.
It's a guy in search of his identity.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like a lot of us Christians. Some of us need to keep searching to really realize who we are.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah.
It's a great one.
Do you have a favorite sound?
A favorite sound? A creek bubbling.
Ooh, water.
I can hear it. Yeah.
Rushing water.
I love that sound.
If you could explore any other profession, what would it be?
Any other profession? I'm really interested in the medical field.
Yeah.
My dissertation crossed it. It was a theology and medicine. It was actually called a study of the effects of Christian prayer upon chronic pain and loss of range of motion due to surgically implanted material. Was my dissertation.
Whoa. That's awesome.
And it was a crossover between medicine and theology. And I had part of my counsel, my advisors were professors of Harvard and Vanderbilt, as well as theologians outside medical people. So I found that quite interesting. I love
That's
to
awesome.
talk about.
And still the pursuit of healing.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Randy, when
Final
it's
question.
all said and done, it's wrapped up, and you're before the Lord in heaven, what are the first words you want to hear Him say to you?
For a lot of my life, I would have said, because I'm heavily performance oriented. You know, I needed a lot of sozo for stuff early on. So I would have said, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant."
Yeah.
And now I think I'd like to just put his arm around and say, "Man, proud of you. You did a great job. I got some people I want to introduce you to, and let them hear the story of what happened to them." And so it's more of a, "Hey, love you."
Yeah.
That's so,
So
beautiful.
good. Thank you for being here.
Thank
That's
you,
a
Randy.
good
You're
one.
such a
You're
gift.
welcome.
You're such a gift to us, and thank you for your dedication and your life to this
Yeah,
pursuit.
you're welcome.
It's really appreciated. Well, guys, thanks for listening. We're wrapping up. Leave your comments below, and we will see you next time for another episode of Iris After Hours. This podcast is presented by Iris Global. For more information or to support the work of Iris Global, please visit us online at irisglobal.org.
You can also text to give. Simply text the amount you'd like to donate to 530-338-3837. Or to speak to someone at Iris Global, call our office at 530-255-2077.
Iris Global is an international Christian mission and relief organisation with a focus on working amongst the poorest of the poor and those most in need.
We hope this podcast has inspired your journey. Thanks for joining us for Iris After Hours.